The edge was not keen, but the cottonwood logs were dry and they split well, the halves leaping away as the blade sunk into the face of the block, which was the trunk of the cottonwood itself. The boy split each log in half and then split the halves in half, family of 4, over and over, pausing only to carry the pieces to the corner of the house and add them to the stack. The house was stucco of some defeated color, with viga stumps jutting from the face. About it lay a graveyard of trucks and farm equipment and other wreckages, all of it wallowing in a tall yellow grass. In the shade of the narrow portico at the front of the house sat a muscular, brindle dog, tracking the boy's movements. It seemed to be waiting for an excuse to attack him. Around noon, with the sun roaring down, he walked to the hand pump near the smaller house, the casita, and struggled with it until at last the water retched up and ran in a cold stream that tasted of stones and iron. He bowed his head under the stream, and when he stood again, a girl was sitting in a chair in the shade with the dog. A thin-armed girl in a black bikini top and enormous round sunglasses, her insteps gripping the wooden railing. The boy lit a cigarette and stood smoking it in the shade of the casita. Later, the man came out with 2 bottles of beer and a ham sandwich on a plastic plate. He was a large, red-faced man in a black t-shirt tied across his gut. He had a bad back and moved like a man in ankle chains. His name was Tom Carl, but the boy didn't know if Carl was his last name or the second part of his first. He took the sandwich and one of the beers and said, "I don't think I can do much with these right now, but thank you." Tom Carl looked at the stack of cordwood near the house. "I can see you know how to work. You don't have to try to impress me." The boy looked around for a place to set the sandwich and the beer other than the face of the trunk. "We came out here to work too," Tom Carl said, surveying the ruined machinery of his kingdom. "Spend more time together, fix the place up, a family project. Angela lasted 5 months and hightailed it back to Phoenix, and now my daughter is counting the days. One day that dog will go too." "Angela," said the boy. "Angela, my wife," said Tom Carl. "That's my mother's name." The older man looked at him and then took a long swallow on his beer. The boy stood holding the sandwich and the beer. "Give 'em here," said Tom Carl. And when his hands were full again, he turned and took 2 steps toward the house and pulled up short. "How long you been sitting there?" he said. The girl's painted toenails made a ruby necklace in the sun. She did not look up from the magazine in her lap. She turned a page. "Since the dawn of time," she said. The boy was at the corner of the house stacking cordwood when the girl rose from the chair and reached in a stretch for the portico ceiling, showing her dimpled stomach, ladder of ribs, and he thought of Caitlin and her friends in their track shorts and their tight tops, barefoot empresses of summer days, conspiring in voices that made no effort not to be overheard by the male in the house, the plain, meaningless lump of boy who burned at their periphery. That boy, older now than those girls were then, older than this one before him. "Come on," said the girl, and she made a kind of dash past the dog. She bent and slapped her thigh. "Come on," she urged. She waved a hollow length of bone. "You want this? You want this?" The dog rose to all 4s and sluggishly followed. The girl waggled the bone before the dog and said, "Go get it," and flung the bone into the high blazing grass. The dog took a step forward toward the thrown bone, swung its head to watch the boy returning to the tree trunk, and then slunk back to the shade and to its dirty square of carpet. The girl stood with her back to him, drenched in the reddening light, young and hip-cocked, preposterous, beautiful. "Can I bum a smoke?" she said. She stood to his left, hand to her forehead, shielding the big sunglasses from the sun. White well of armpit giving off faint scent. "Sorry?" "A cigarette." He saw himself reflected in the dark glasses. He looked at her bare feet, the dusty ruby toenails. He pulled the flattened pack from his pocket and held it to her. She pinched up a cigarette and tucked it under an edge of her bikini top and then offered these same fingers. "Victoria," she said. He wiped his hand on his thighs and took hers. small and warm, and he said his name. "What's the matter with your leg, Sean?" "It was in an accident." "A car accident?" "Yes." "Are there scars?" You better step back," he said, and she stood by as he swung the axe down on another log, retrieved one from the halves, and set it up. Swung again. He thought about every movement, every pause. "So, Sean," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What are you doing here?" "Here?" "Out here." She glanced around the arid world. "Making gas money." "To get someplace else?" "Yes." "Someplace in particular?" "No." "So, pretty much you just drive around in that truck?" "Pretty much." She nodded. She watched him. He passed a forearm over his brow. Far above in the sky, a threesome of large birds turned a slow wheel. He stood another log on the block. "What about company?" she said. "What about it?" "Don't you get lonely?" He brought the axe down on the log, and the two halves leapt. He picked up one of the halves and stood looking at it, as if the new yellow face of it would tell him something. Then he placed it on the block and split it in two. "Well," said the girl, "everybody needs some company sometime." And without waiting for his reply, she turned and walked back to the house, and knowing she knew he watched just the same. Why not her, he thought. Why not this girl instead of Caitlin? The idea of such carelessness, such arbitrary selections in the world, made him almost sick. By sundown, there were only a few logs left, and he quartered these and stacked the cordwood. On the horizon, a yellow moon rose from the mesas. Tom Carl returned carrying 2 sweating bottles of beer. They stood in the song of insects. Tom Carl looked at the Chevy and said the boy was a long way from Wisconsin. And the boy said he didn't live there anymore. And Tom Carl asked, where did he live? And the boy looked at the moon and said the last place he'd lived under a regular roof was up in Colorado with his father. How long ago was that? February, he said. And you've just been driving around since then, job to job? Yes. Tom Carl sipped his beer. Is there more of you up there in Colorado with your father? The boy looked at him. More of your people, your family. The boy shifted his weight to his bad leg, and Tom Carl said, it's none of my business. I'm just curious if your dad's alone up there or not. There's an old man on the ranch where he's living. Tom Carl raised his drinking arm and slapped at it with his free hand, killing a mosquito. How come you left, if you don't mind me asking? The boy was silent a long time. A hard, bitter morning, he remembered, and the old green truck wouldn't start, so he took the good truck, the blue Chevy. He'd been living with his father in the ranch house for 5 months, and he hadn't thought until he was miles away how it would be when his father woke up to find another child gone. It just seemed like it was time to go, he said at last, and took a drink. Tom Carl put a hand to his back and grimaced. I thought maybe you had some kind of trouble. Trouble? Trouble. The boy met the older man's eyes. Then he looked into the dusk and said, no, sir, no trouble. I'm just trying to make gas money. Tom Carl showed him the casita and the daybed there and the shower head over the stone floor. The boy thanked him, and Tom Carl tipped his bottle goodnight and closed the door. The boy removed his boots and socks and lay back on the narrow bed, his knee pulsing with the old damage and his shoulder answering where the muscle and bone went on chopping. And he lay in this dialogue of pain, thinking about his father up in Colorado, his mother in Wisconsin in the hospital, and Caitlin wherever she was. And he didn't think he would sleep, but he did. And in his sleep he climbed a path in the woods, in the dark, making his way by the progress of the animal he followed, a dog or wolf of such whiteness it raised shadows from the things it passed, the trees and stones. He kept pace with the white dog until the path grew steep and he began to fall behind, and soon he was in total darkness. Clawed at by the limbs of trees, falling to all fours, he scrabbled on until he came to her suddenly on the path. pale and naked and curled upon herself, and though she was very young, he knew it was her. He said her name, but she only lay there holding her knees, and when he looked up again, he saw the white dog watching him. He moved to pick her up, and the dog advanced, and he let go and backed away. The dog came on, and he backed away until he could no longer see her, until she'd slipped wholly back into the dark. Then the dog walked to her, and by its light he saw her again, saw that she was sitting up, and that she was grown, covering her breasts with one arm and gesturing to him with the other, beckoning him back, come back. Thank you.